The executioner placed the iron mask over her face. It fit perfectly, designed specifically for her head measurements. Inside, a 4-inch iron tongue pressed against her mouth. When they locked it, the metal tongue crushed down on her real tongue, pinning it in place. She couldn't scream, couldn't speak, couldn't swallow. The Scold's Bridle. Used across Europe for over 300 years on women accused of gossiping, nagging, or speaking out of turn. Some were paraded through town for hours wearing it, blood dripping from their mouths. Others were chained to public posts for days while the iron tongue slowly destroyed their ability to ever speak again. That's number 10. And it only gets worse from here. Because medieval Europe didn't torture people to get confessions or information. They did it to send a message, to terrify entire populations into submission. These are the 10 most disturbing torture devices actually used between 1200 and 1800, ranked by the suffering they caused. And number 1 was so effective, it was banned after a single public demonstration. Number 10, the Scold's Bridle. A metal cage that locked around a woman's head. But the true horror was the design. A flat iron plate inserted into the mouth, pressed down on the tongue with metal spikes or a blade attached to the underside. Some versions had a bell attached to the top of the cage, so when the woman was paraded through town, everyone could hear her coming and mock her. Court records from 1567 in Scotland detail a woman named Bessie Taillefer who wore one for 16 hours. When they removed it, her tongue had swollen so badly it protruded from her mouth. She never spoke clearly again. The last recorded use was in 1824 in Chester, England. The device itself still exists. You can see examples in the Tower of London's collection. But here's what makes this particularly disturbing. These weren't used on criminals. They were used on wives, daughters, servants. Women who talked back. Women who argued with their husbands. Women whose only crime was having an opinion. But at least the Scold's Bridle was temporary. Number 9. The Heretic's Fork. A simple device, 2 metal prongs attached to a leather strap. One prong pressed up under the chin, the other pressed down into the sternum. The strap fastened around the neck, keeping the fork in place. The victim couldn't lower their head, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The prongs didn't penetrate deep enough to kill, they just held the head in a permanently elevated position. After hours, the neck muscles went into spasm. After days, victims would do anything to make it stop. This device was specifically designed for extracting confessions during the Spanish Inquisition. Grand Inquisitor Tomás de Torquemada documented its use in over 2,000 cases between 1483 and 1498. Victims were kept in the fork for up to a week. By day 3, most confessed to whatever their interrogators wanted. Those who didn't often died from exhaustion. Their bodies simply gave out from the constant muscle tension and inability to sleep. The fork itself bore an engraving. On one prong, a bureau. On the other, I recant. A reminder of what was expected. Which brings us to devices designed not for confession, but for punishment. Number 8, the breast ripper. 4 metal claws heated until they glowed red, then clamped onto a woman's breast and torn away, removing flesh down to the bone. Used across Europe from the 1300s through the 1700s, specifically on women accused of adultery, self-induced abortion, or witchcraft. The torture was performed in public. Executioners in Nuremberg, Germany kept detailed records. Between 1589 and 1617, they used the breast ripper on 43 women. None survived more than 3 days afterward. Infection and blood loss killed them all. But survival wasn't the point. The point was the message sent to every woman watching. The device varied by region. The German version had 4 claws. The French version, called the spider, had longer, thinner prongs that could reach deeper. The last documented use was in 1764 in Bavaria. The device was finally banned not because it was inhumane, but because it was considered too disturbing for public viewing. Multiple spectators at executions had fainted or vomited. The authorities decided it was bad for morale. The devices are getting worse. Number 7, the brazen bull. A hollow bronze statue of a bull, large enough to fit a human inside. The victim was locked into the bull through a door in its side. A fire was lit beneath the bronze. As the metal heated, the person inside was slowly roasted alive. But here's the twisted genius. The bull was designed with a complex system of tubes and stops inside its head. When the victim screamed, the sound was channeled through these tubes, making it sound like the bull was bellowing. To the crowd watching, it looked and sounded like the bull itself was alive and roaring. The inventor, Persian of Athens, presented it to the tyrant Phalaris of Sicily around 560 BC as a gift. Phalaris asked for a demonstration of how the sound system worked. Persian climbed inside to explain the acoustics. Phalaris locked him in and lit the fire. The inventor became his own device's first victim. Phalaris himself was eventually overthrown by his own people. They knew exactly what to do with him. They used his own bull. According to the historian Diodorus Siculus, his roars could be heard across the entire city. The device was used sporadically throughout medieval Europe, documented uses in medieval France and Spain. One bull still exists in the Torture Museum in Bruges, Belgium. Chemical analysis of the bronze confirmed it had been repeatedly exposed to extreme heat. The interior shows carbon scoring consistent with organic material burning inside. We're past the halfway point. From here, everything is exponentially worse. Number 6. Judas Cradle. A pyramid-shaped wooden seat, extremely narrow at the top, about the diameter of a fist. The victim was suspended above it by ropes, then slowly lowered onto the point. The pyramid wasn't designed to penetrate, it was designed to stretch. Over hours or days, gravity did the work. The torturer could control the speed by adding or removing weights attached to the victim's legs. Sometimes they'd leave people suspended overnight, then lower them further the next morning. The Venetian Inquisition used this extensively. Records from 1548 describe a woman accused of witchcraft who was kept on the cradle for 3 days. Each day they lowered her slightly more. On the 4th day she confessed to everything they accused her of: flying, consorting with demons, cursing her neighbor's crops. All fabricated. She was burned at the stake anyway. But here's the truly diabolical detail. The cradle was never cleaned between victims. Infection was built into the design. Even if someone survived the initial torture, sepsis would likely kill them within days. It was torture with a delayed death sentence. Number 5. The rack. You've heard of it, but you don't know the reality. The victim was strapped to a wooden frame, wrists and ankles tied to rollers at opposite ends. The executioner turned a crank, pulling the limbs in opposite directions. The goal wasn't to kill. It was to dislocate every major joint in the body without severing any limbs. First, the shoulders would pop out of their sockets, then the hips, then the elbows and knees. Each dislocation was accompanied by a sound witnesses described as cracking wood. But the victim remained conscious through it all. Skilled torturers knew exactly how far they could stretch someone before ligaments tore completely. The Tower of London's rack was used continuously from 1447 to 1673. Over 200 documented cases. One victim, a Catholic priest named Nicholas Owen, was racked in 1606 for refusing to reveal the locations of priest holes in English manor houses. They stretched him for hours over 2 days. His joints dislocated, but he never revealed a single location. He died on the rack. They never got their information. Survivors, and yes, some survived, were never the same. Their limbs were stretched several inches longer than normal. They couldn't walk properly, couldn't use their hands. One survivor, documented in 1591, described his arms as feeling like rope, not bone. The joints never properly healed. He lived another 12 years in constant pain before dying of what was likely infection from poorly healed wounds. 3 devices left. We're entering territory that makes medieval executioners themselves refuse to work. Number 4. The breaking wheel. The victim was tied spread eagle to a large wooden wheel, arms and legs extended along the spokes. An executioner used an iron bar to methodically break every bone in the victim's limbs, not to kill, but to shatter bones while keeping major arteries intact. They started with fingers, then hands, then forearms, then upper arms. The same pattern with the legs. Finally, the ribs. The goal was to break every bone in the body while keeping the person alive and conscious. Executioner manuals from 1500s Germany specified the exact order and number of strikes. 42 strikes total. The wheel would then be mounted vertically on a pole and displayed in the town square with the victim still attached, bones shattered, body slowly dying over hours or days from internal bleeding and shock. In 1586, a thief named Hans Steininger was broken on the wheel in Munich. Court records describe the execution lasting 4 hours, 2 hours for the breaking, 2 more before he finally died. The crowd watching numbered over 2,000. The last documented use of the breaking wheel was in Prussia in 1841. A man convicted of murder. By that point, even the executioner protested, calling it barbaric. He was overruled. The execution proceeded. Before we get to number 1, there's something you need to understand about number 2. Number 2, flaying. Removing someone's skin while they're still alive. This wasn't a quick process. Professional executioners, and yes, it required training, could keep someone alive and conscious for hours while systematically removing their skin in strips. They started at the extremities. Fingers first, then hands, then arms. The goal was to work toward the torso slowly, preserving major blood vessels as long as possible. Anatomical knowledge was essential. Sever the wrong vein and the victim bled out too quickly. In 1577, a Habsburg executioner named Franz Schmidt documented a flaying in his journal. He recorded that the victim remained conscious and able to speak for approximately 1 hour and 40 minutes after the process began. Schmidt noted this professionally without emotion. It was his job. The Romans flayed St. Bartholomew alive. Medieval Europe continued the practice for over 1,000 years. The last confirmed case was in 1809 in the Ottoman Empire, but rumors of its use in isolated European regions persisted into the 1830s. What made flaying particularly horrific wasn't just the pain, though that was unimaginable. It was that many victims survived the initial flaying. Without skin, they died slowly over the next 12 to 48 hours from dehydration and infection, completely exposed, unable to regulate body temperature, every nerve ending on fire. And now number 1. The torture method. Historians still debate whether it actually existed or if it was propaganda designed to terrify enemies. But Ottoman and Persian records confirm it was real. Number 1. Scaphism. Also called the boats. Here's how it worked. The victim was stripped naked and placed inside a hollowed-out tree trunk or narrow boat. A second trunk or boat was placed on top, creating a coffin with only the victim's head, hands, and feet exposed. They were force-fed milk and honey until they developed violent diarrhea. The mixture was also smeared on their exposed body parts. Then they were left floating in a stagnant pond. Within hours, insects arrived. Flies, wasps, and other bugs were attracted to the honey and to the victim's waste, which accumulated inside the boats. The insects laid eggs in the victim's exposed flesh and in the accumulating waste. The eggs hatched into maggots. The maggots fed. The person trapped inside was eaten alive by larvae while simultaneously developing sepsis from festering in their own waste, unable to move, unable to escape, force-fed more honey each day to keep them alive as long as possible. The most detailed account comes from Persian records describing the execution of a soldier named Mithridates in 401 BC, who killed a member of the royal family. He survived in the boats for 17 days. 17 days of insects, maggots, infection, and being force-fed to prolong the agony. When they finally pulled him out, witnesses reported his body was more insect larvae than human flesh. He was still breathing. He died shortly after removal. Greek historian Plutarch documented this account, and while some modern scholars questioned its authenticity, Persian administrative records discovered in the 1990s confirmed scaphism was used for high-profile executions. At least 7 documented cases between 500 BC and 300 AD. That's why it's number 1. Not just because of what it did to the body, but because of the calculated, deliberate prolonging of suffering measured in weeks, not hours. 10 devices. 10 methods of inflicting maximum suffering with minimum mercy. Some were designed for confession. Others for punishment. All of them were used for one true purpose: terror. Control through fear. The Scold's bridle controlled women's speech. The breaking wheel made an example of criminals. Scaphism sent a message that certain crimes would be punished beyond death itself. Here's what keeps historians awake at night. We like to believe we've evolved. That this level of cruelty is ancient history, impossible in the modern world. But every one of these devices was designed by humans, approved by courts, carried out by professionals who went home to families after work, used in societies that considered themselves civilized, religious, lawful. The capacity for this didn't disappear. We just changed the methods. Which device disturbed you most? The comments will reveal more about human psychology than any history book. And if you want to know where these devices are now, 3 are still on public display, and 1 was used as recently as the 1800s. That's the next video. Subscribe so you don't miss it.